Tell me, darling, could we run away? We could hide away by the cactus desert blue. I can see it just a mile away from this crowded place. I could lay there next to you.
Hey friends, welcome back to our channel, Best Freaking Friends Forever, for another episode. So if you guys would, if this is your first time watching us, welcome, and thank you guys for joining us and tuning in. If you guys would subscribe down below or leave comments to our videos, that would be wonderful. So we're going to be doing, or talking about Stand By Me today, which is a fan favorite of a lot of people. So box office stats, it was released on August 22nd of 1986, or in 1986. Its budget was $8 million. In the U.S., it grossed $52 million, which with today's inflation is $129 million. Opening weekend, it did about $243,000, but it only opened in, I think we said 16 theaters.
Yes.
That particular weekend, which amounted to, with inflation today, it'd be $602,000. And then worldwide, it grossed $129 million. Which, well, that was with inflation. It grossed $52 million.
So successful movie with, Stephen King. You can't go wrong with making
I think it was based on a short story called The Body from a book of short stories called Different Seasons, which also includes models for The Shawshank Redemption, Apt Pupil, as well as The Breathing Method, which has not been adapted to film.
From my understanding, Stephen King left crying because it was the closest adaptation that was done for any of his books.
Well, it was funny because at first he thought he left, or that he was visibly shaken, and he thought that, and wasn't speaking, and he thought that he was upset. And yeah, he came back and said that it was what you said, the best adaptation. We have Gordy LaChance, Teddy Duchamp, Vern Tessio, Chris Chambers.
Okay, so Vern's brother, Billy, and his friend. So Billy and his friend took a car, happened to come across the body, and they were talking on the porch of Billy and Vern's home. And Vern was underneath the porch looking for his pennies that he had done a treasure map to, and his mom had thrown the map out. I think it was out. That was right. His mom threw the treasure map out, and so he's got all these little holes under the porch, and he's under there digging for his pennies. And then he hears his brother Billy and his friend up above talking about the little boy that was, and they're saying that the boy that came up missing was around their age.
Yes, his name is Ray Brower, but yes, he was he was there.
12. Yeah, like 12-ish, somewhere, right? Yeah. So, yeah. So then Vern goes and talks to the guys and was like, this is what was said. And they're like, oh my gosh, if your brother knew you were listening, he'd kill you. And they were like, well, let's go find it. Why don't we do it? And so they all come up with a plan to tell their families what they're going to do. And they're like, we'll be back in time. Nobody will even know we're gone. And so they head out with sleeping bags, no food, had some cash in their pocket.
Because that was a funny part of the movie. They're like, didn't you bring food? No, didn't you bring food? And they were all getting on Vern because I guess he was the one that was usually, I think from what I understood, he was one that was always a good planner. I feel, or I don't know, because they were like, you didn't bring it either? Because I think he brought I forget what he brought.
The comb.
He brought a comb because he wanted them to look nice for the papers, right? When they found him.
Yeah, because they were like, oh, you'll get a badge, you'll get a medal, we can go. And Vern's always the standoffish character. So he's always like, I don't know if we should do that, guys. That's his character.
Mm-hmm. And he kind of gets, they're rough on him at times. Teddy's the worst, towards him anyway, I feel like. I feel like Chris seems like he's the hardest, but I feel like he's the most understanding out of all of them, and he's the one that kind of like, hey guys, come on, knock it off, like that type of thing, when one of them's ragging too hard on the others, because they are boys, they're kids. We see all throughout their 2-day trek that they all get on to each, you know what I mean, they all mess around with each other. It's not anything,
figuring it out, because they said, oh, it's 20 miles, and Chris asks Gordy, what do you think? And he says 20, maybe 30. So 30 miles to walk. If you were walking it, you could do about 4 miles in an hour, roughly. If, taking your time, pacing yourself. So it would be a 2-day walk. Stop at the, the junkyard. They stopped at that junkyard. And Gordy goes and gets some food. Well, another thing we should mention is Gordy has an older brother who died in an accident. And his parents kind of idolized his big brother, but Gordy did too. So it was rough on the whole family to lose this family member. And we get to see that a little bit because, you know, Gordy was like, that summer I became like the missing boy or whatever. I forget how he termed it, but he'd asked his mom a question and she's taking clothes off the clothesline and she's just spaced out. Like she just can't even function.
Deal with loss. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Gordy has a hard time with it. He has a nightmare. And that was something that we talked about. Bodie, we were out talking about this movie and he's like, yeah, his dad said that I wish it was you. His dad didn't say that. He only said it in the dream. And Tony's like, well, that's up for debate. So I think what has happened, because his parents do speak to him so little, is that Gordy knows how his parents feel about him, and Gordy has manifested those words in his dream. I don't think this is my personal opinion, I don't think that his father ever said things like that to him. It was just kind of known. And Gordy manifested that, and then therefore it came in his dream when his father said, it should have been you. But he could be saying that when Gordy's awake. We don't know. We never saw that.
Well, no, because they are kind of, I mean, the parents are having a difficult time dealing with it because it was a sudden loss. I think, what was it? It was a car crash, right?
Yes.
And he was a sports person, really good at sports.
Well, the town knew him.
Right. So, he was very popular. Everybody loved him. He seemed to be really good with Gordy. We see that in the interactions that they show, like in his little flashbacks or whatever, like when he's at the dinner table and they're like, oh, well, he doesn't need to be focusing on this girl. He needs to be focusing on this game tomorrow or whatever. And he's like, well, Gordy wrote a book, or Gordy wrote a story. And he's trying to be like, and he's like, it really was good. And you see the relationship between the two of them. So you can see why Gordy misses him.
Yeah.
Right. Why he idolizes, because he really was a good older brother to him. They really do, I feel like, have a loving relationship towards one another. And then the parents just don't know how to deal, so they kind of, go into, they do. They have a hard time. Yeah, they have a hard time dealing with both. But I feel like all the boys have a backstory.
Yes. Well, and like with Gordy, right. Well, and also staying on that for a minute, like, so as they're journeying to go find this body, you can tell that, like, Gordy has, like, this personal connection with this lost boy, this missing boy. And he has that dream when they're camping out. And then he's kind of really motivated to get going. Even after they go through the mud puddle, the big mud puddle, they go through that. And even after that scene, Gordy's just like, I'm going to go. Whether you go or not, I'm going. Right. And even when he gets there, it's like, to me, I might be saying this wrong, but I got the feeling that his brother's death hit him all over again when he saw that body. And so he's sitting there. Well, he says, why did you have to die?
Yeah. Oh, he's seeing his brother. Yeah, absolutely. That's what I got out of it. I was like, he's seeing his brother. He's asking why he's talking to his brother at that moment.
So yes, like you were saying, each one has a backstory. So then we have Chris, and that got me so much. Like when he was talking about, he did steal the milk money. He's so mature for
the teacher. When he's talking, yep.
He's so mature for his age.
He is, and I think it's because of the way he's had to be. I guess the way he's had to survive, he's become that way. He's had to mature a lot, and I think his brother. Everybody's like, oh, it's always going to be one of those boys, like the chamber boys, because I think his older brother, all the chamber kids, I think he said are issues. But I think they have they don't have a good home life. Like I think his father has issues, right? If I remember correctly. So that's his backstory. He has,
Well, even whenever he's talking to Gordy about the milk money, he said, so let's say if I tried to turn the money back in. Let's just say if I did. He goes, isn't it funny how Mrs. So-and-so had that new skirt? And what broke my heart in that scene is when he goes, I never thought a teacher. Teacher, like, if you have a bad home life, kids always hope that at least school's a safe, and it's supposed to be, like, The next best thing is school. And so it just tore me up when I was like, oh my gosh, that poor kid. Like, nobody had, Gordy was the only one that was like, you can do this. Take the college courses with me. You can do this. And for them to be the age they were and already talking about college was just like, what is going on? Because I was like, how old are these boys again? Because they were just going into middle school.
Right. But Chris is always, encouraging Gordy to write, too.
Mm-hmm.
And, because his parents don't think he's going to amount to much with that.
He told Gordy, separate from us. Get away from us so that you can move forward. Because he's like, all we're going to do is hold you back. Teddy, his background is just so sad. His dad burnt his ear.
And he's the one that always says his dad or someone stormed the beach of Normandy.
And his dad.
Especially when because he has a meltdown outside of the
junkyard.
Yes. And he's talking to the junkyard owner.
Yeah. Well, and in that scene, I took it that his dad was having, I hope I say this right, PTSD.
That's what, yeah. I mean, to me, that's what it seemed like.
I just kind of got the feeling that Teddy was kind of, because Teddy always kind of seemed like, oh my gosh, like erratic type of behavior at times. Mm-hmm. And I just took it that Teddy was mimicking what he's seen out of his father.
I would agree with that. Because it was always about that kind of stuff, like storming the beaches or,
shooting.
Shooting army type things or military type things. Yeah. And
then Vern, I don't know. Did we really get much on? I know they made fun of his weight a lot in the movie. So I took it that was a lot of the things a lot of the issues that he had, right?
Yeah, and I don't think they ever take, I mean, they do kind of, I feel like he reminds me of Chunk from the Goonies.
Mm-hmm.
Like a Chunk type character, because I feel like they don't take him seriously half the time. And he's kind of like, I don't want to say he's their punching bag, but at the same, I mean,
for Teddy, he is.
Well, I mean, honestly, Teddy, like I said, I feel like Teddy is the hardest on him.
Yeah, but Teddy's kind of, or not Teddy, Vern seems to kind of be the type that, like, is slow to the punch. like whenever Gordy is telling the story of the pie eating contest, at the end, Vern is kind of like, but what? Like, he's asking questions. He's like, well, how did he get in? Did he have to pay or did he just get in? And it's like, he just, just like minor I am definitely a Vern, I feel like, when it comes to that. Because I'm always like, but what about this? And what about that? And what about this? And I'm always questioning things. I over question. It's awful.
They were all like, well, you have to have a better ending. What about the ending?
Well, yeah. And even that Teddy was like, well, I forget. What did Teddy say? How did he end it? He was like, do this and do that. Like, he had a more morbid ending to it.
Yeah.
And Tony, when we were watching it, Tony was like, so they were eating the pie. They were eating the berry pie. I don't want to mess it up. They were eating the berry pie. And so the guy wanted revenge on the town for making fun of him. And so he's eating and eating and eating. And then he, of course, throws up. And then that starts a chain reaction of everybody throwing up. But like Tony said, if you notice, everybody must have ate the berry pie because they were all throwing up the same colored. Did you notice that?
I did, now that you say that, yep.
Yeah.
And did you catch, because I read this, that the character Ray Brower, he was the dead boy, appears alive and well during the pie eating contest. During that, he's alive and well. He can be seen standing behind the twins. Well, and I guess the child extra actually did throw up during the filming of the Barfarama.
Okay, so they go to the junkyard. Gordy goes and gets some hamburger. He talks to the store guy, and of course he brings up his brother. Your brother was a great football player. It's like, why do you think this boy wants to talk about his dead brother? Come on now. Gordy goes back to the junkyard, and he doesn't see his friends, and they're escaping out of the junkyard. And then we see the junkyard owner stick his dog on him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that was a fear that they had. Everybody said that junkyard dog would. He tells him to sick, and he always goes for the fun part of a person.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, trying to be friendly here,
right? We're trying to be YouTube friendly, y'all.
Yes.
Yeah. So then they continue on walking. The one scene that's a big scene for this movie is when they go to walk across the bridge and they're like hesitant, like what should we do? And of course a train shows up. But the boys in real life had to act all of that without an actual train.
Yeah, because
they were doing take after take after take. Who directed this?
Rob Reiner.
Yeah, so Rob Reiner did the take after take after take, and Rob Reiner was like, okay, we've had enough. And he scared the bejesus out of these kids and was like, get it right or you're done. And the next take was the last take.
I think Jerry O'Connell had the hardest time with that, didn't he?
Well, yeah, I mean, he was crawling on the track, and I'm sure, yeah. Oh, Gordy's in there like, get it.
And when they did film the train scene, making it look closer, they used a different type of lens and all of that when that whole scene. So that was way further away than what it actually was, I guess.
Right, yeah. Well, and there's, you can tell in some scenes, you can tell the screen is split. If you really look, you can tell that there's one screen with the boys and one with the train. You know, it's all safety thing. But it's a good scene. They do, the boy, you know, he must have put the fear in God in them somehow because they really showed up when it really counted, when they really needed to get on there and show what they were worth. In the very beginning, too, Chris has a gun, a handgun. And Gordy, it shoots off because he's like, oh, it's not loaded. And it accidentally shoots off and they run away. Which we'll get into that some more too at the end of the movie.
Oh yeah, well that's when the first time they meet Kiefer Sutherland's character kind of takes his hat.
Oh yeah, and that was his brother's hat. So there's a couple of things whenever they're camping, because I like that they made the camping scene a little bit extra. So we see they're sitting around the campfire and they're talking about various things that don't even matter. They start, let's keep watch. If it was me, I'd have been like, Vern isn't even watching. Like, why would you allow Vern? He the whole time is like this, like a cricket, and he's turning and twitching, and I'm like, that boy is gonna hurt somebody. He's gonna do more damage than good.
Well, and that's the scene where we see Chris and, I mean, both Chris and Gordy, I feel like have a heart-to-heart breakdown type thing, because that's when I think he tells Gordy about the milk money and how Gordy, about his writing and things like that, and how his parents, you know, don't even really want him. And Chris pretty much tells him, I'll be your family. Or I think for the most part, I think he does, doesn't he? He's like, he was
saying, like, if your parents aren't going to do what I'm doing right now, I'm going to do it. Because he's telling him, like, that was whenever he said, you need to separate from us. Well, no, not really. But, like, you know, just giving him all this advice. And he's like, if your parents are going to tell you this, I'm going to tell you this.
And that's I don't know, for kids their age, it was so good. Like, just their acting in those moments. Like, I felt like, I don't know. I mean, they really did a good job.
Yeah.
And you can tell me that River Phoenix, who plays Chris, really did get upset, because you could see, like, or at least I caught it, like, that when he was done crying and stuff, you could see the snot fall and stuff like that. So he really did, get into it and get into character.
Yeah. So then after that, the next thing we see is Gordy's like reading a comic on the train tracks, and he's clearly the last one to keep watch until everybody wakes up, and a deer comes.
I love that part. I don't know why, but just his smile.
It's just so cool to, like, be out in the wild and a deer just come across, and neither one of you, like, scare or spook the other one.
Right.
It was just a really pretty moment.
Well, I found on IMDb, the significance of the deer Gordy alone sees and decides to keep to himself until his adult life has been debated. Two theories are often suggested. The first one is that after all the bad things in the lives of the four boys, the death of Gordy's brother and the treatment from his parents, Ace and his friends, Teddy's abusive father, Ray Brower's death, etc., the deer represents some things in the world that are still beautiful, and this gives him hope. He wanted to keep it to himself so no one could debunk his theory. The second theory for that is Gordy has spent the entire trip in the constant company of his friends, not doing or saying anything that isn't seen or heard by the others. The deer is the one thing that is personal to him from the entire time they are searching for the body.
I think it's both.
I mean, I think it could be. I definitely think it does represent something beautiful to him, and how there is beauty even in, you know, and like you said, how neither one of them spooked one another. They coexisted.
Yeah.
I mean,
cool.
I really did like that scene.
Yeah, I do too. I really like that. And then this is the day too. So they wake up the next day and they cut across the field to cut down some time. And that's whenever they run in what I'm calling the big mud hole. They run across that big mud hole. And then we get into a really fun scene with the leeches.
Which like I said earlier, every time I think of this movie, that's the one scene I go to. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But I go to Gordy, flipping out.
I don't know. If I was a boy and I looked down like that and I'd have seen, I probably would have had a moment too.
Yeah, well, and he freaks out and then he passes out because it's got the blood. But again, contrary to urban legend, the leeches were fake. They were made from mottled latex stuck on with rubber cement, which the boys found irritating to their skin. And like you said, you can see it when they take him off and when they're laying on the ground trying to revive him after he passes out. Will Wheaton, which played Gordy, recounted that in a 2000 interview that the tenacious cement with a red coloring mixed into it to simulate blood caused them to be denied admission to the hydro tube water slide after the day's filming because it looked like a contagious skin disease.
Yep, makes sense.
Sounds like the kids got into a lot of trouble on off time. I mean, they really did. Yeah. Like the four boys got into a lot of mischief in the hotel they were staying at during filming. This included throwing all the poolside furniture into the pool, Wheaton fixing video games so they could play them for free, and Phoenix, spurred on by the other boys, unknowingly covering Kiefer Sutherland's car in mud, only discovering whose car it was when Sutherland confronted a scared and nervous Phoenix about it later.
Well, especially like Gordy and Chris, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And there's a bond there. Which of course we see at the end of the movie that they hadn't spoken to each other in at least 10 years. And that just broke my heart because I was like, you guys were so close.
Mm-hmm.
But my goodness, how many of you, I mean, even me, like how many people out there are still friends with their childhood friend? It is very rare for that to carry on. Because I mean, there's kids that I like literally grew up from like very, very like 5 years old, and some of which are dead and some of which, I mean, we talk, but we're nowhere near close like we were as children.
I feel like college changes. I feel like that's when because a lot of times maybe they go to different colleges if they do go to college, or you go to college and get a job and it's out of state,
or people get married or move away,
have kids and have to move away, and it does get hard to stay in touch.
They're all being rowdy and Gordy's still over to the side, and that's whenever we talked about that where he finally was like, at that point, he had to see the body. Like, there was no stopping him at that point. Because they were like, well, because Gordy was kind of showing signs of being, he had passed out, and he was showing signs of shock and, like, a little bit of trauma. And Chris was like, let's just turn back. And Gordy is like, absolutely not. We are going forward. Or he was, at least. And I think, really, after that is when they get to the area to find the body, because then we start seeing the older boys all starting to talk about what was found, and so the older boys we get to see a little bit of them playing out what they're going to do, and they're going to now go find the body themselves too, again, because they want credit.
Yeah.
And then of course the younger boys, they do find the body,
and that's when the older boys show up.
Yeah, they show up. And then we see the gun again. And that is when Gordy shoots the gun up in the air. And that is when Ace is like, oh, okay. And he's trying to ask Gordy for the gun back. And Gordy's like, no.
Well, and we have to understand why Gordy is doing that, too. Because Ace has a knife and has Chris.
Yes.
And not a headlock, but he has him where the knife is to his throat. And he's threatening Chris. And you don't see Gordy behind him until you hear the shot. Then they show him.
Mm-hmm.
So, because Ace keeps telling them to leave, that let them have the body and go. And like Chris is like, no. Like Chris is like absolutely, positively refusing to go. And Ace is threatening him and everything. And then finally that happens. And Gordy has to shoot off the gun.
Yeah. And they finally make the decision that nobody will get credit for finding it, and they do an anonymous call.
Yep.
And they head back.
You just didn't do that anyway.
Well, yeah. Well, the older boys had discussed Billy and Eyeball. I think, wasn't it Billy and Eyeball? Those the two that found, right? So they had discussed, let's just do an anonymous call. And they were like, no, they traced the calls. I'm like, you know, they had payphones at this era. So you could have just walked up to a payphone and called real quick. So yeah, they walk back home and we see Gordy, which we saw Gordy in the beginning. He was as an adult Gordy. We see him in the beginning and he's reminiscing about all of this. And then at the end, we see him, he's typed, because he's an author now, and he lives in a nice house and has a son of his own, and he's actually typing this story out, which I'm like, I cried like a baby at the end, because he talks about what happened to each one of them. So Vern ends up, he got married out of high school, had 4 kids.
Chris is in a bar, I think. Doesn't he try to stop someone from getting stabbed and he gets stabbed in the neck?
He's a lawyer. He did go on to, he went on to college and took the courses, and yes, he became a lawyer. Teddy died in an automobile accident in Harlow, Maine in 1971 or 1972, making Deschamps approximately 23 years old at the time of his death.
So it looks like that really all of the ones, so Vern and Gordy are the only two
left.
Really made it to adulthood and did, which I think is sad about Chris though. I don't know why his death hit me the hardest. And I don't know if it's because in real life, Phoenix, the way he went. Since 2007, the city of Brownsville, Oregon, which served as the setting of Castle Rock, which is where they're from, has held an annual Stand By Me Day celebrating the movie. In 2013, the Chamber of Commerce set the 2016 date to July 23rd so that the big 30th anniversary event would fall on a Saturday. The movie has a significant fan base in Japan, and they receive a lot of visitors from there as well.
And this is my husband's favorite movie, like #1 top favorite movie. So we had, at some point, had to get this one in. I hope we did it justice, Tony. That was Stand By Me with Will Wheaton, River Phoenix, Corey Feldman, and Jerry O'Connell as their 4 main characters. Really good movie. A really heartfelt, sad movie. Has a lot of meaning to it. Really good. Like we said before, my husband's favorite. And I can see why. It's a good one. So let us know down below. What do you think of this movie? How do you feel? Have you read the book? I think I really am going to read the book after watching this. I would love to. Let us know in the comments what you think. Please like, share, and subscribe for us. It really helps us out when you like our videos. It makes YouTube push them out more for us and get more people to see the wonderful work that we're putting out into the world. So definitely help us girls out. But until next time, I am Tiffany. This is my BFFF, Shelley. Join us next time, friends, for another great episode.